top secret information of yours. Only 1.3 million people have access to your most private data, and they spend $18 billion a year preventing you from knowing the truth about them. Why could that be? Hello there, you 6.4 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage towards mutual awakening. Together we can confront the systems of corrupt power that lay all around us like a most intoxicating veil. Turn on the notification bell right now. We make this content every single day of the week, even weekends, and we want you to see it all. I spoke to Matthew Connolly. He's a professor at Columbia University. He spoke to me about espionage, the deep state. I've been talking a lot about the CIA and the FBI, what their function is, and of course there are great people working at any institution. I've met great people, not necessarily the CIA. I don't think I have. I don't know. Maybe they're watching us right now. But what's important is the way that they control and surveil your information while denying us access to information that could be vital for us. Stay to the end of the conversation. Let me know in the chat and the comments what questions I've missed.
Is there an argument, as Robert F. Kennedy suggests, for disbanding the CIA in particular? Are these institutions salvageable, or do they have at essence a kind of, I don't know, if not negligence, a kind of hypocrisy? Is it impossible for them to function in order to protect a population?
Well, it is hard to imagine a world, without the FBI, without the CIA. But I like to remind people that in the United States, these are relatively recent inventions. Going back, before World War I, there was no Central Intelligence Agency. There was no Federal Bureau of Investigation. The U.S. was really an outlier. For the first 150 years of our history, we didn't have intelligence agencies. The only time that the U.S., after the first, period, the Revolution and the early Republic, after that point, the only time the U.S. employed, large numbers of spies and intercepted communications was during wartime. And after wars ended, they dismantled this apparatus. So it's not impossible to imagine that in the future, we won't necessarily have to have 18 different intelligence agencies. Like, to me, that's the aberration, the way that this system has just grown completely out of control.
Matthew, since the Patriot Act, no American has any privacy. It's possible for them to store your data and look at it at will. One of the things that you cover in your book is the number of people that have access to information. I think you said up to 1.3 million people. I wonder if this kind of legislation and this kind of intrusion enforces the idea that the state has a degree of authority that infantilizes a population. As you've just said, that typically these are the kind of measures that would be deployed in a war, then rescinded subsequently. The fact that they are ubiquitously applied suggests that there is a permanent state of paternalism. And I'd like you to just explain to us a little more how, since the Patriot Act, the American population have been universally spied on, and also about this, how the recent attempts to review that legislation are being delayed under the auspices of protecting us from American drug cartels and stuff.
Yeah, well, there are people who would say the reason why we have the Patriot Act, the reason why we have 18 different intelligence agencies and so on, it's because that's the only way we can protect American lives, right? That it's our national security that's at stake. But when you look back, those moments, periods, long periods, when the United States was at peace, in fact, for a time we were the world's only superpower. I'm talking about the 1990s. Even then, these intelligence agencies, especially the National Security Agency, were pushing to expand their surveillance powers, right? So it almost doesn't matter, what kind of threats supposedly, threatened the country. It seems like no matter what is happening in that outside world, inside our government, there are people who are constantly pushing to expand their ability to spy on the American people. I'll give you one example of this. Back in 1984, the Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel, this is the part of the government that sets the rules for everyone else. They're the ones at OLC who get to decide what's legal and what isn't. They wrote an opinion according to which American surveillance agencies like the NSA, they can intercept our communications when they go abroad, right? So when American, phone calls or emails or what have you, when they go through foreign data centers, all of that is fair game. Right. And that is a giant legal loophole that allows, at least in principle, the NSA and all these other agencies to systematically spy on American communications. You know what the funny part to me? First of all, it's the fact that it was written in 1984. That's one. And the second thing is nobody outside of government has ever been allowed to see this ruling. Even American senators have asked to see this, and they have been told they're not allowed. So we have this secret law that allows government agencies to spy on us in secret.
One of the other, that is funny. One of the other revelations of Snowden was the collaboration between what are known as the Five Eyes countries, which I suppose suggests that ultimately this is a global problem, whilst there's no doubt that America has avowed enmity towards Russia and China and other countries that might challenge them for unipolar hegemony. There is elsewhere a kind of what appears to be the deep state apparatus that undergirds global corporatism, with neither party being willing to meaningfully amend these institutions and the legislation that we've even so far discussed, which allows intrusion and breach of privacy of an unprecedented level. What is there to be hopeful for in the conventional political space? How can they ever be stopped? No one talks about releasing Julian Assange. No one talks about releasing, to any serious degree, the files surrounding the murder of JFK. And this is all presumably because if we had the type of transparency to which we are entitled, we would conclude that these agencies primarily function in order to control the American population rather than protect them. So what is the political solution for a problem of the nature that's outlined in your writing?
Yeah, well, the theory behind the Five Eyes, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support it, is that what they're doing, basically, the British government, together with the United States, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, each one of them can act, outside their national boundaries in ways that they're not legally allowed to within those boundaries and against their own citizens. So the theory is that, they could each spy on each other's citizens. Now, I don't know for a fact, that that's happening right now. But the fact is, every government, including the U.S. government, does do these very operations when they're working abroad. And there's almost no limit, right, to how much and in what ways they will spy on the citizens of other states. So that means, that no matter where you live, you're fair game, for dozens of different intelligence agencies, many of them now equipped with the most powerful tools available from the private sector, right? Like the Pegasus software allows them to break into your iPhones and even turn smartphones into surveillance devices, right? So even like relatively small countries can now purchase this kind of technology off the shelf. So what do? I think the first thing people need to know is they need to be aware, of what's now possible and what in fact is likely. Because one thing these surveillance programs want most of all, and they even use the word itself, they want us to be naive. They thrive on our naivete. So to the extent that people are blithely unaware of how governments can spy on them, this only is to their benefit and empowers them further.
How come so many people got access and security clearance? You said like 1.3 million people. Well, how come?
Yeah, well, because there's so much classified information that you couldn't run this government without giving over 1 million people access to top secret information. So to give an example, back in 2012, the U.S. government itself issued an estimate as to how many times government officials were classifying information secret, so nobody would be allowed to see it for decades to come. It came to 93 million times. 3 times every second, some government official was deciding something had to be classified secret, right? So just imagine, how would you even run, the American military, these 18 different intelligence agencies, the Justice Department, the FBI, and all the rest of it, if you didn't have lots and lots of employees who had access to this information? And also all of their many consultants, right? So many hundreds of thousands of these people are not actually government employees. They're consultants working for the government, in some cases earning more than they used to back when they still worked for government, when they got these clearances. And so, yeah, it's 1.3 million. And that includes people, like Jack Teixeira, the airman first class, who is found to be sharing secrets with his friends on Discord. So all kinds of people now have access to all kinds of information.
And yet billions are being spent to prevent ordinary people gaining access to this information. So again, what kind of relationship does this suggest that actually exists between the state and the population that they govern. If they have access to all of our information and our access to their information is significantly impaired, how can we begin to meaningfully change the world, have a fairer world, without meaningfully addressing and amending institutes that don't tend to be affected by the cycles of transition within ordinary electoral democracy?
Well, Russell, every person who's run successfully for president of the United States has promised that they would bring a new day of transparency and accountability. And that includes Donald Trump. Donald Trump back in 2015, 2016, he promised he was going to release all the JFK files, but he didn't do it. It tells you something. It tells you something of the fact that these people, once they become president, if they didn't already, they fall in love with secrecy. It's one of the few ways that presidents can be completely unaccountable. Because Trump was right when he said basically presidents are sovereign over secrecy. What they decide is national security information is information nobody else is legally entitled to see unless they have that so-called need to know. So how do we change this? Well, we have to stop believing presidential candidates when they tell us that as soon as they're in charge of this system, they're going to dismantle it. It's just not going to happen. The only parts of our government that could actually do something about this are Congress and the courts, right? So that's the only way. If you want to check unfettered power, you got to bring in the other two branches of government.
Well, what do you think about that? Do you feel safe? Is your data safe? What are we going to do? Should we disband the CIA and the FBI? Is there a need for new institutions? Let me know in the chat below. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. And remember, we're on Rumble every single day. Turn on the notification bell so you get to see our content. More important than any of that, though, please stay free.